Andor Episode 5 is here and it needs to be broken down, so let's get straight into it. We open with Cyril sulking in his bedroom after he has lost his job and he takes a moment to look up at the sun, which is kinda symbolic of Coruscant society in the sense that the richer you are, the higher up you live. And it's a moment of sadness for the character realizing that he has failed to reach his own aspirations. He then gets some really tough love from his mother and his mom feeds him some cereal, which is of course with blue milk, probably the most famous Star Wars beverage ever and first seen in A New Hope. On the table, we get to see some meilooruns. Now, the meilooruns were of course the fruit introduced in Star Wars Rebels and were known to be Hera Syndulla's favorite. Cassian wakes up to realize his belongings are missing and finds it in the hand of Skeen. Skeen shows off his tattoos, which has the initial KH on top of what looks to be a barcode, which Andor points out represents Krayt head. Krayt obviously refers to the Krayt dragon, the large reptilian monsters that reside on the planet Tatooine, so perhaps this was some sort of criminal gang that Skeen was part of before joining the rebellion. But what is more interesting is the next tattoo that Skeen shows to Andor, and it's a tattoo that Cassian calls by the hand. Now, I think this could be a reference to the Empire of the Hand, or simply known as the Hand. The Empire of the Hand in Legends was a martial confederacy located in the unknown regions. It was an expedition funded by the Galactic Empire in order to explore and pacify the unknown regions under the leadership of none other than Grand Admiral Thrawn. Beyond just expanding the Empire, the Hand had another purpose, which was to guard the Empire against unknown threats rising in these regions. So perhaps this was a small setup for the Ahsoka show, which we of course know that Thrawn will be a part of. Cassian then goes on to mention that he was in prison on Sipo when he was 13, which seems to be a new location entirely and one we have yet to explore. Judging by Skeen's response, it seems to suggest that the both of them were in captivity or subjugated as a result of the Hand's activities. But you kinda have to take Cassian's story with a grain of salt. As the show has shown so far, you can't really tell if Cassian is telling the truth, and it's further called into question when Skeen says that he has never heard of it. Although if it was true, it would make the timeline possible as he did say that he was imprisoned before arriving on Mimban as a cook. Skeen then says,
"The axe forgets, but the tree remembers."
Which is actually an African proverb, meaning that while the Empire might forget that they have hurt them, those who have been hurt by the Empire are not so quick to forget. We are then introduced to Lydia Mothma, daughter of Mon Mothma, and it's pretty clear from the scene that her family resents her for her political commitments. But while the scene makes out Lydia to be an ungrateful, spoiled brat, in Legends she does eventually grow up and begin to understand the importance of her mother's work. It should also be noted that Mon Mothma apparently also had a son in Legends by the name of Jobin, who would later die in the Battle of Hoth. We get some more insights into Nemik's character, and he's sort of an ideological revolutionary and very much reminiscent of young student revolutionaries seen throughout the Cold War period. So it's pretty clear that the show is portraying him to be a sort of ideological center for the team. And while Skeen represents a much more simplistic reason to want to fight against the Empire, that being revenge, Nemik represents the rebels who fight for a higher ideal. It's just really interesting to see how the show was able to create so much nuance within the rebellion and reasons for that rebellion. Lieutenant Gorn makes a quick inspection on the Aldani cultural site, and we find that the Imperials have been using it as sort of a hangout area, basically disrespecting the heritage site, and at first it seems as though the lieutenant is unhappy about it simply because he is aware that an operation is about to begin soon. But we later learned that he had an Aldani love interest who was killed. So the anger here really is just the lieutenant being angry over the Imperials disrespecting a cultural site important to someone he once cared about. A neat little detail that adds a whole lot more to the character. Back on Ferrix, we see the Empire moving in and essentially evicting people out of their homes to make way for Imperial operations. We are introduced to Captain Tigo, who seems to have been put in charge of the operation on Ferrix, so it's likely that we will see him mess up the situation, leading to riots in later episodes. As the rebel group are practicing for their upcoming operation, a lone TIE fighter sweeps into the valley, just a loud reminder to the group that nowhere is safe. We then learn that the Imperials plan to tear the dam down to make space for an airbase, to which the Corporal states that it makes sense. But if you think about it from a local perspective, tearing the dam down and flooding the region would mean that the old temple would be completely submerged in water. It would mean that the Aldani are losing a sacred cultural site. Just another example of how the Empire just doesn't care about the local people and how incessant the Imperial machine is. The corporal then asked if the lieutenant could imagine if there was thousands of people gathered here at this event, and the lieutenant remarks that he can, perhaps foreshadowing some big event soon to happen. Andor tries to put the charm on Cinta before he notices Skeen snooping through his stuff. Vel subtly warns him not to try any funny business. Deirdre continues to pursue her theory on rebel activity, and during this conversation we get a mention of a few planets, such as Hosnian Prime, which was mentioned in an earlier episode. We then get Kessel. This is of course the planet with the spice mines and also the same location in which Solo completed the Kessel run. We also get Fondor, a planet which served as the manufacturing hub for the Imperials, primarily serving to produce ships for the Imperial Navy. It would also later be the site of key battles during the Galactic Civil War. Jakku gets mentioned, which is of course the homeworld of Rey, and a mention of proton warheads from Base K. Proton warheads are an explosive device commonly used with proton torpedoes, a weapon frequently used by the Rebel Alliance. We then see Deirdre take some pills, likely taking it to stay awake or to deal with the stress. We then see the model of the dam being burnt, and interestingly, just outside the fire is the miniature of the old temple, perhaps foreshadowing that in the next episode the temple will be spared from the ensuing conflict. Cassian tries to put his charms on Cinta, but before he can do so, Vel intercepts him. As the team sets off for the dam, we find Cyril eating Syril, and it seems like his mom managed to get him a job with so-called Uncle Harlow. Now, the name Uncle Harlow has been dropped a few times this episode, and it's not entirely clear who this character is. However, there is an Imperial Moff Harlow located in the Cartalo sector in the Outer Rim. The name is spelled slightly differently, but it could be the case that whoever this Uncle Harlow is might be someone who works within the Empire, and could potentially pull a few strings to get Cyril some sort of position. We then get to see Lieutenant Gorn prep the groundwork for the rebels by ensuring minimum security down by the vault, and we get some crucial information that an engineering officer from Coruscant will be visiting soon. So if the mission in the next episode goes well, word might reach all the way back to Coruscant and to a very specific Imperial who might be curious to learn about this. Skeen then figures out that Cassian is hiding a kyber crystal, and we're also notified by Nemik that an Imperial shuttle is on its way to the garrison, likely transporting the engineering officer from Coruscant. Cassian finally admits that unlike the rest of them, he is being paid to be here, but he also rightfully points out that the day before the mission is always the most difficult, simply because there's not much left to do except wait. And it's really just a scene that shows how much more experience Cassian has in this sort of operation. Being a thief and an insurgent most of his life, he is most likely familiar with how these things are going, which is also why it makes him such a valuable asset to the rebellion, being able to provide this sort of experience to other rebels. We get a brief moment with Mon Mothma and her husband just demonstrating the rift between the two, and we get a moment with Cyril, who now seems even more committed to hunt Cassian down, perhaps blaming him for all his troubles. In the background, we can actually see some action figures, perhaps action figures of what look to be clone troopers, giving us an insight that Cyril always aspired to be a military man, which is where he might still end up. We then see Skeen give his backstory to Cassian as a form of apology. All the while, Luthen is anxiously waiting to see how the operation went, and in his workshop we get an even closer look at the two holocrons. But what is even cooler are these stones sitting on the shelf. This is actually a reference to another Lucasfilm IP, Indiana Jones. These are the Sankara stones, something which was seen in the Temple of Doom. So that was everything I could find in episode 5 of Andor. It was definitely a much slower episode, and I was kinda hoping that we would already get into action, but it seems like this will be another build-up episode. However, on the plus side, we really get to spend some time with the characters and time to flesh them out, which tells me that we're gonna see one or two of them die off in the ensuing battle. Anyways, that's all for this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I'm the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.